Welcome back. In this video, we're going to discuss how and why political parties change. So let's get right to it. So in recent times, one of the main reasons that parties have had to adapt and change recently is the rise of something known as candidate-centered politics. And this is the idea that many voters these days are more concerned with the individual person, the candidate, than they are with their party identification. So they are worried about that person, whether they support policies they like, the perceived character of that person, but really their support for that person is more about them than it is about whether they are a Democrat or a Republican. And there are two people who I think really exemplified this change. Donald Trump, he's a Republican, but many of his supporters, it really isn't about his party identification. In fact, the Republican Party leadership, they really weren't supportive of him in the primary process. They did not want him to become the party's candidate, but the voters did from the Republican primaries, and so he was able to win in spite of the lack of support from the Republican Party. Kind of similarly, Bernie Sanders, he only joined the Democratic Party in time so that he could run for president as a Democrat. He didn't have a lifelong history of being a Democrat, and yet many people liked him anyway. Again, it wasn't about the fact whether he calls himself a Democrat or an independent. They like him personally. So that's candidate-centered politics. One reason for this change is the rise of the primary system. In the old days, party leaders would choose the candidates, but now citizens, members of that party, are able to vote for the person that they want to be their party's candidate in an election, again, giving more power to the people and weakening the political party leadership in the process. Similarly, we have changes in campaign finance law that have made it a lot easier for candidates to raise money themselves. Kind of in the old days, candidates were very reliant on the political party to raise the money and then to distribute that money to the candidates. So if you wanted to run as a Democrat, let's say, you had to make sure that you were pleasing the Democratic Party because they were the ones who controlled the money and they would support you or not support you, and that could make the difference between you winning or losing. Now, candidates raise a lot of money themselves, and we're going to talk more about that in a future video, but they are able to raise a lot of money. They don't rely on the party so much, which means they have more freedom to do what they want. So again, we see how each of these contributes to the weakening of the political party and the rise of this candidate-centered politics. Next, we have something known as a critical election. Now, this is an election that precedes a party realignment. This is a dramatic shift in party loyalty. This is where many people who typically had voted for one party now switch and they vote for a different party. Now, this is not a temporary shift. It's not that for one election, for instance, in 1984, a decent amount of Democrats voted for Ronald Reagan. But then in 88, they went back and they voted Democrat again. So that's not a realignment. A realignment is 1932, where a large portion of the country that had previously been Republican, they became dismayed by the Great Depression, they voted for FDR, and then they kept voting for the Democratic Party for the rest of their lives. That group of voters became known as the New Deal Coalition. So you saw the country really flip from being run really by the Republican Party from like 1870 until 1932, where the Republicans were the dominant party in American politics. And then from 1932, for the next couple of generations, the Democratic Party was the dominant party in American politics. So this is a long-lasting shift. A more specific version of this is known as a regional realignment. So the best example of this is probably the South. From the time of Andrew Jackson until the mid-1960s, the South was reliably Democratic. They were known as the one-party South. They always voted Democrat. And then that started to change. In the 1960s, as the Democratic Party supported civil rights legislation that many Southerners opposed and didn't support, they began switching slowly but surely to the Republican Party until the point where now today, the South is solidly Republican. So we see this shift again, a long-lasting shift from one party to the other. Another term I just want to point out is party de-alignment. And this is what the United States appears to be going through today. Party de-alignment is when both parties are losing support. So it's not that Democrats are becoming Republicans or vice versa. It's that both Democrats and Republicans are kind of leaving their parties and becoming independent. And so we see a general decline in party identification. Alright, so that's it for this video. Until next time, this has been a La Money production. Thanks again for watching this video, for all your support. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button. Again, it really does help me out. I appreciate it so much. See you guys next time.